Welcome to another episode of Reel Theology. I'm Reverend Brittany. I'm here with Reverend Trudy. We have been talking about movies today. We've watched some last night. We talked about Sentimental Value, a very good movie earlier. And now we're going to talk about one of my favorites. I think Reverend Trudy's going to have a lot to say about this one. And this movie is called Sinners, which is already starting us on a theological journey because which of us are not sinners? Exactly. So, Reverend Trudy, what are you thinking?
I loved this movie.
Did you love it?
Yeah. You and I actually saw it in the theaters when it first came out on the big screen. If you have an opportunity to do it on the big screen, do it. We rewatched it last night on the small screen. It was still amazing, but it didn't quite overwhelm you like the big theater did. It is one of these stories that has so many different levels to it, different layers. It's deep, it's rich, it's exciting, it's beautifully filmed, and it hits us at so many different levels.
So many, yeah.
I am really excited to talk about this.
Absolutely. It's like my two favorite things, like history and theology. Had a baby, and I loved it.
And it was Sinners.
There you
go.
Wouldn't that be interesting? So the movie opens with a quote that comes up later in the movie, and it says there are...
It kind of sets up the whole theme of the movie, right?
The entire... The foundation of the movie.
Yeah.
There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true that it can conjure spirits from the past and the future. This gift can bring fame and fortune, but it can also pierce the veil between life and death. And first of all, let me say, I think that stuck out to me for you so much because you are such a music person.
That piercing that veil, you know, life and death, the difference between past and future. Oh my gosh, yes, music absolutely does that.
Absolutely does. So the movie starts with that scene, but we meet a young man who is in the cotton field. He's a sharecropper. I think it was in 1932 is when it takes place in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And he's a sharecropper, but he is also a musician. And he has this heart and love for music. His father is a reverend, and his father is like, no. You need to not be dancing with the devil because you dance with the devil and you're going to bring him home, right? And Sammy, is his name, is like, Dad, I'm going out. I'm going to play some music. I'll see you tomorrow for church, right? It also, you know, when he goes into his dad's church and his dad wants him to read from 1 Corinthians 10,
Verse 13.
Verse 13,
Yep.
And Sammy starts to read, and then he closes the Bible and says the rest of it from memory, as though I know this, right? I know the word, and I'm still going to, take my own path.
And it's all about temptation.
Correct.
Right? So there's that connection between music is a temptation in the religious world, at least in this, the way it's presented here.
Yeah.
And he should not be doing it.
And that's that's a very common understanding, at least in the South. I can't speak for many other places, but even in a movie that talks about chronicles Tina Turner's life in the church, they didn't like the way that she sang because they said that it was too much of the world when she was a little girl even. So that thread of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, gospel music was of course appropriate, but blues was not seen as appropriate and was inviting the devil in kind of thing. And Sammy didn't agree with that for good reason. However, the movie unfolds in a way that is like so twist and turny. So Sammy goes out and then he meets up with two of his cousins, Smoke and Stack, who are coming down back home to Mississippi from Chicago. And they are going to open up a juke joint. And a juke joint is just like a bar in the country.
That's
where
right.
Folks would get off work, black folks particularly, would get off of work from the plantations or sharecropping and such and come and have a moment of drinking and dancing and fellowship together. So Smoke and Stack are Smoke, Stack, and Sammy are our main characters, I would say. But there's some other folks in there as well.
Lots of wonderful characters.
Lots of wonderful characters,
as they collect friends that will help them set up this juke joint. Yes, and it picks up from there this theme that music has a way to help us survive. This juke joint is intended to gather people together who aren't free anywhere else. This is in the Jim Crow era, right? Still a lot of restrictions, still a lot of racism. KKK is active. All of this. They needed their own space.
Correct.
And music was a way in which they could feel alive, right?
And Sammy, when the scene opens, he's in the cotton field and he's singing, right? And that is something that is very powerful, because a lot of folks who were enslaved would sing songs, right, of faith that would bring them through the hard days, right? And so music has this way of speaking to the community in a way that words fall short sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I experience that, right? Music allows me to hear things that I don't normally hear, to feel things that I don't normally feel. And if you're having, this is such a minor illustration, but I've said it before. During the pandemic, when I would feel down, I would put on an album and listen to it and feel so much better, right? So just magnify that in the idea that these Black people were being so oppressed, but they had the music to take them to a different world, to have a different kind of understanding, to be able to survive yet another day. And it's a music that is theirs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Smoke and Stack, they're going to set up this juke joint, and they involve other people in the community, right?
Yep.
And so they go get their friends that they have known for their whole lives. And one couple that was really important to me to name was the Chinese couple, Bo and Grace, because there is a huge Asian and Chinese population in the South that people don't talk about, particularly in Mississippi, because those folks were hired, right, to build the railroads. And then we have to talk about the Chinese Exclusionary Acts and those kinds of things. And so they were positioned in the African American community because that was the one place that they could go and be safe. Relatively, right? From the Klan or anything, but that they could go and make a living for themselves and build community. And so there wasn't this us versus them. There was this communal understanding of life, love, and struggle together that I really appreciated.
I appreciated that too. So another thing that is said right after the beginning that you quoted that sets up the whole movie is it praises music and it's a thin veil. It can be a conduit. And sometimes it can attract evil. That's when the story gets really good,
That's where it gets good.
This is where people might assume that this is a horror film. It is so much more than that.
Yeah.
Because of this context that we've already just named. And so this music is a conduit that will attract evil. And I feel like there's an absolute truth to that in some way, in the idea that all of the arts and all of the poetry, the imaginative creativity that we are capable of as human beings that help us survive horrible situations is going to make angry whoever is wanting to undo us.
Correct.
Right? And I do feel that there are some times when we act in ways that are creative and new, and the folks who don't like anything new and who feel threatened will do some horrible things to keep that newness from changing or from having its impact. Right? So there's that truth about music can open up creativity in ways that are challenging and threatening.
Absolutely. And I think that his dad, when his dad was saying, if you keep dancing with the devil, you're going to bring him home, like the idea of the devil being in being the music angel, right? The fallen angel.
Yeah.
And that's how the devil can kind of go between this world and the next. That's in Ezekiel. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The scriptures, you know what I mean?
That.
Yeah. I just looked it up.
There's got some things to mine around there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so it's really interesting. I think part of the religious restrictions against music, especially if music is a conduit to the supernatural, that's threatening to religious institutions.
Can you say it
right?
again?
Can I say that one more time? You know, if you can find your way to see God or any spirits of supernatural variety without the church, then why do you need the church?
Why do you need the church?
Right? So it's to their advantage to be able to say, you stay away from the music. Because it might make you feel some things that you shouldn't. Right? And some of that might be an empowerment. It might be a survival. It might be something more than a Sunday sermon. Can I even say that? Right? You don't need the church.
Yeah. I think music helps you to ask questions that you wouldn't necessarily think of all the time on your own.
Yes.
You know? Like music tells a story and makes you question the world around you.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So the evil that this music attracts, vampires. I didn't see that coming in the movie.
I didn't know. At first, I didn't know what was happening. There was something. I mean, yes. There's so much. It's so rich. It's so rich.
Yes.
But there's a scene where a man knocks on the door, right? We're giving you spoilers, so I forgot to say that at the top. Yeah. Sorry. But this man...
Stop now.
Yeah.
But we'll try and name them, too.
Pause it. Come back when you've seen it, and then see how you felt about it.
There you go.
But this man, he knocks on the door, and he's trying to get in, right? And obviously, something in the buttermilk, in my opinion, was not clean. Because I'm like, baby, what you knocking on these people's door for like this? And you sizzling like this. You know, he was sizzling like a steak, okay? Or some fajitas. And so I was like, okay. And then right?
Literally.
And he was really like, and I was like, okay, y'all don't see the steam coming up off of him, but okay.
Right. You're going to let him in his house?
This white couple lets this white presenting man into the home, right? Vampires, there's a theory that they can't come in unless you invite them.
That's right.
Right?
And that's played out in this film.
And that's played out in the film, right? And that's what Sammy's dad was saying, like, you're inviting the devil in, right? The devil can't get to you unless you invite him in, right?
There you go.
So they invite him in, and there's some natives that come, and they ask this woman, have you seen a man? And she, in her racist enculturation, has a gun to them, and they're like, okay, bye, but you're in trouble. And then she realizes that she is in trouble.
That she is the one in trouble.
in trouble.
Yeah. And so the man who came sizzling, he was the one that said, I'm running away from the Indians.
Yeah, he did.
And he was.
He was.
But not because the Indians were the threat.
Correct.
No, I'm sorry. They were the threat, actually. Yeah. Because, and here's another twist of this story, right? It's the Indians who are the good guys in this scenario, despite the couple's racism.
Correct.
The Indians were trying to kill this man or to capture him or whatever they were playing. They were finding him so that they would be straight.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They gave this woman a blessing as they left, right? And I'm going to try to read what I wrote. May God watch over you and be with you. And I said, Trudy, that's a benediction.
Yes, you did.
That's a benediction. That's the final farewell, baby.
There it is.
You know?
There it is. Yeah.
So, in this movie, it also, brings up a lot of the traditional African-American folklore and some of the African-American traditions that were brought over from West Africa into the Americas and then, were created from from history and their present circumstances. So one of the things that we see is this idea of what is referred to as hoodoo, right? Is a particular spiritual practice of African Americans, Native African Americans, that bring in a bunch of different spiritual practices from West Africa and so on and so forth. And one of the women who's in the movie, her name is Annie, and she is, we would call her, she's not like a shaman, but essentially she's a medicine woman, right? And people come to her for healing and protection. And so she gives Smoke what they call a mojo bag that he kept on his body, on his person, right? As this idea of protection as he went out into the world. And so there were these practices that took place and still do take place of providing protection with what the earth has, the herbs. There are different herbs that people, lean into for protection and healing and so on and so forth. So it's not just about Christianity, but hoodoo also has Christian practices influence. They're not so, I don't want to sound sacrilegious here, but there's not a straight line of distinction between these things. Yeah.
That's an interesting justification, though. The hoodoo that we see as being pretty effective, and the Christian religion, Sammy's father, the preacher, two very different ways of understanding faith, of how faith is expressed, and it's an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, and it's this, when she said, soil of my soil, bone of my bone, blood of my blood, I bless you, Ashe. I kept thinking of soil of my soil, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Bone of my bone, I kept thinking about, we were created in our mother's womb, Adam's rib. Ugh. And then also blood of my blood, I thought about, do this in remembrance of me. So a lot of these practices were, again, heavily influenced by Christianity and African spirituality that came together and forged a way for people who were holding both between.
Yeah. So there's one thing that I'm curious about. The vampires, we come to learn that whenever someone's bitten on the neck and dies, the vampire gets to have the knowledge of all the other vampires, all the things that they knew in life, all the experiences, and they all share that. And I got to thinking about that. That's really almost like an omniscient God, right? And theologically, there's been a trend away from that omniscient God, the God who knows absolutely everything, because it's really kind of hard to suggest there's human agency when God knows everything that's going to happen. It kind of can feel predestined. And the process theology would suggest that God doesn't know fully everything that's happening because we can change our decisions, and we, whatever decision we make in this moment is going to change the next moment, and so that that idea of God as not knowing everything, and particularly a God who's relational in with humans to forge the future together, right? As human makes decisions, it seems as though. That's an interesting side note in this film for me. It's the idea that the bad, the evil, are all one. And when I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's so lovely, but it's evil. That's so no, that's so evil. But then that element of that they know that counters kind of the relational aspect of what we see in the Black community who has to fight the vampires. And that relational, that we need to know one another, in process theology would say, so that we can know God. And God will know us, and we will all be in relationship together in our differences. And that's how we come to know more. And in the context of this movie, that's what keeps us from using our knowledge to hurt others.
Oh, yeah.
Did you follow all that?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
There you go.
I did.
Right?
Yeah, this idea that, these vampires, once, like you said, once they bite the person, they become a part of the vampire fold, and then they know everything.
Yeah.
And they're pretty happy as vampires, right? And they were talking about this idea that the black vampires were talking about this idea. Well, the white ones too were inviting them into, you come here with us and you won't suffer anymore,
right,
because there is no Jim Crow over on this side, and there's no oppression over here.
Yeah.
And so, but Annie, being the spiritual woman that she is, she's like, absolutely not. Like, I don't want to live this world in this way forever. I would rather die.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That just reminded me of Jesus' temptation, right? It's the devil can make it all look so good and can tell you just the right things and leave out just enough of the other things that you feel like, oh, well, why not? Maybe that's not a bad plan, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be temptation if you weren't intrigued by it,
That's
right?
true.
You could
That's
never
true.
intrigue me with an onion sandwich, baby, because tempt me with that, because I'm not going to eat it because I don't like that. But
there you go. That's right.
There are many other things that I enjoy, right?
That's right.
So, yeah, this movie talks a lot. I mean, there's so much diversity in the movie.
Yeah.
There's so much conversation about who's in, who's out.
That's right.
How the oppressed work together.
Yep. Diversity. Not a lot of white people.
Enough.
I mean, all the leads, don't you think? I mean, except for the vampires. I mean,
in the Klan.
Right. Well, in the Klan.
That's enough for me.
Well, yep, absolutely.
That was,
But yes, I loved seeing black leads and the Chinese couple. Honestly, I think that's why this might not get an Academy Award.
I didn't say it, you did.
And that's a sad thing. And because it's so forthright with naming racism, that's sad to me. I'm going to be rooting for it.
Because it's an interesting, like, play, right? That these black folks have come to this juke joint and created this space, carved out this space for themselves away from the racism of the day, right? And then the night comes, and now they're fighting against vampires, right? It feels as though the story is that they can't find peace anywhere, right? Because something is always seeking to destroy them, right? And so this music is their way of, the music is what drew the vampires to them, right? So it just speaks to, like, the complicated dynamics that oppression put on the hearts, the minds, and the souls of people.
That's right.
And the bodies of them as well.
I want to come back to that, but especially the music scene. But I want to come back. I interrupted you when you began to say there's so many different kinds of, I don't think you said it this way, power struggles, but dynamics, relational dynamics. And you, you started the men, the women, the Irish.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So the vampire that the main vampire that starts this has an Irish accent, and I thought that was important to show, because I think that, now I can't say this for sure. No, I'm not Ryan Coogler, but I think that there was this idea of using the Irish as a part of the conversation, because they were also oppressed coming over to the Americas, and we often hear that, such and such can't be racist because their grandfather was Irish, and da-da-da-da-da. And that's not the case, but it also shows how oppression impacts every person who is involved. Right? No matter what your skin tone was whatever.
That's right.
But they were telling it, at least in my opinion, when I saw it, I'm like, the Irish, The men and the women, of course, the women are these powerhouses of knowledge and skill, and they're the ones who are, like, holding all of this ancestral memory and protecting the children and protecting the men and protecting each other. And the men operate in a very patriarchal way with like the money and the brute,
Right,
you know,
right,
the need to protect, right?
Right.
So yeah, there are a lot of different dynamics.
And then there's the other one of the other main characters. I just lost her name. Who's passing for white, but has some colored blood. And there's that dynamic because she's not exactly belonging, but she is there, and yet she's there with
Mary.
Mary, that's right. It was little Mary. That's right. So you see just all sorts of questions of who belongs, who deserves to be there, who doesn't, who's being oppressed, and how deeply that oppression goes, how long has that been. All of that is at play in some of the most beautiful ways, centered around this music that is making everybody survive.
That's making everybody survive.
Yeah.
Right? And the blues, essentially, and ragtime music, right, is this, the ragtime music was like a genre of music at a very particular time during enslavement, right after enslavement, that was folksy, like American folksy, you know, not bluegrass, not blues, not gospel, but its own thing. But blues is kind of like a culmination of all of that. Like blues is ragtime music and it's gospel music, and it's, you know, it has this American, you know, experience of life for Black people at that time in the South. Not just in the South, but the South is really where those stories are harvested and the depth of the music comes from. Yeah.
We got to talk about the music scene.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them, but the first one is the memorable one. And it really illustrates the idea that those who can make really good and true music pierce the veil between past and present. And so they're in the juke joints before the vampires come, and they're playing just amazing music. And everybody's dancing, and as you begin to, as the camera moves around the room, there are people who are misplaced in terms of the historical accuracy. It's an anachronism, right? Where you got a hip hop artist there, you've got you know, an African from
the Yoruba tribe.
That's right, and you see
the Chinese were in there too.
The Chinese were in there too. A modern day ballerina went across the dance floor. So that piercing of time, and even in the music itself, it began to branch off into different genres of hip hop and blues and jazz, and it just was all there at once. And it was such a beautiful celebration because you looked at it and you thought, everybody feels free. In fact, at the very end, this I don't think is part of the spoiler, but one of the characters says, you know, up until the time the vampires came, it was the best day of my life, right? And that music had played a huge part of that.
A huge part.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think about our faith in general, you know, hymns for us as Christians.
Yeah.
A lot of the hymns are much older than we are.
That's
for
right.
sure.
Yeah.
And when we sing those songs, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, or, you know,
Amazing Grace.
Be Thou My Vision. You know, those, to me, those hymns. And of course, when I think of, you know, Negro spirituals, you know, there's something about singing the songs that my ancestors have sung that remind me that I am not far from them. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And there's this idea sometimes that, you know, in Christianity, that there's this, you know, we don't believe in ancestral veneration and like, you know, this idea of honoring your ancestors, not worshiping them, but honoring them. But I don't think that that's true, because Jesus tells us very specifically, do this in remembrance of me, right? And so every time I think that we sing a song that has been, you know, sung by the people who've come before us, there's a sense of remembering that we have and in honoring them. And so I think that music has a way of again, connecting us, because the songs that we sing will be around for the next generation, and they'll take it and make it their own and sing it the way that they do. But there's something about the tradition of singing the songs that have been sung before you.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to improve my statement on that I said earlier about religious institutions and, who needs them. This is the number one thing I think religious institutions have to offer, and that is the depository of that tradition. Some of it's not good, of course, but the depository of all of the things that have happened before us that provide that connection to our ancestors, all of the hymns.
Absolutely.
And the new ones.
ones.
Yeah.
It's a play. I mean, I think that music is very sacred because, like I just said, it speaks across time and space. Yeah. Right? They happen at a very particular time and a very particular reason. Yeah. But,
that's right.
Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. That's not just a word, right?
Yeah.
People have been denied. Enslaved people were denied the idea that they were human, let alone the idea that they could actually be Christians. Right. So, no. I'm going to tell you, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine.
Yeah. That's
Jesus is a part of me too,
right.
This claiming and naming. And I think that that's what these folks were trying to do in creating this music that spoke to not only their experiences today, but were speaking to the folks who had carved the way for them to be able to have a juke joint, right?
Yes,
and then hopefully they're carving out this space of a juke joint, of this, this sacred, holy space for them to be, would also carry the next generation forward in different ways.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about the end. If we're okay at that point.
Yep.
So I heard it say about this movie that black music attracts white vampires. And at the end of the movie, the KKK shows up. It's the next morning. Can
I say why the vampire part?
Okay.
I think that there's something about black people creating something and then white people calling it their own.
Well, yeah.
Continue.
Yeah.
That was my note.
There you go. So the KKK come, and it's apparent that the KKK, the one who owned that building and sold it to the men for it to be a juke joint, had done that before, and was planning on doing it again. And the KKK came to kill everybody. That's not exactly what happened. That's just horrible, but we know that happens. I want to say one more thing about the end. In another scene, and this is a spoiler alert, Sammy, he's old. He's in 1996 or something. 92.
I remember it.
Okay. And you were too.
I was too.
And he's at a bar, and two of the vampires, Stack and Mary, come. Now, earlier in the film, we think that Stack got killed
by smoke.
But they come in, sit next to Sammy. They recognize each other. They came for him. And Stack says, my brother made us promise to leave you alone. And he offers, well, we can take you out of your misery of life, but still live forever, right? And he says, no, thank you. That's a scene for me that says, love conquers. Love conquers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This has been great.
We could talk about this all day long.
I know.
All day long. But the last thing that I will say is that as the vampires, Mary and Stack, are walking out of the bar, Stack turns around and I can see that he's wearing a chain, right? He's like in the hip hop era of fashion, and he has on a gold chain, and there's a Jesus pendant on the chain. Yeah. And there's this, that's the idea that he has to fit into the world now, right, as a normal person. And what other way to do that than to be a part of the church, right, or to have this claim to Christianity. But I also think that it's even deeper than that, is that there was something about their faith,
Yeah.
even as vampires, that still carried them forward.
They all said the Lord's Prayer
They
together.
all said the Lord's Prayer
Yes,
together.
Yes, yes.
And so I think that for me is, to me, shows that even in the midst of it all, evil, racism, oppression, despair, death, that nothing will separate us from the love of God.
There it is. It's a great movie. Go see it. Thank you for listening. We'll hope to catch you another time.
Bye.
This is a production of First United Methodist Church of San Diego. To learn more about our events and ministries and to access additional learning resources, visit fumcsd.org.